Hello, friends, and welcome back to Heartscapes, where we are practicing the system of Reiki to be rooted, to be spacious, to be connected, and to remember ourselves. My name is Michaela. Welcome back to the studio. And welcome back to week 2 of our 21-day Reiki practice journey, walking through the Sanmitsu, this cultural, spiritual, and philosophical foundation for the system of Reiki from its Japanese origins. The Sanmitsu, the 3 mysteries of how we interact with, perceive, understand, and relate to the world around us. The Shinmitsu of our body, the Kumitsu of our voice, of our breath, and the Imitsu of our mind. Through practices that lead with and bring together these 3 mysteries, these 3 mystic elements of our being, we can, in greater capacity, align all parts of ourself so that we can show up in our fullness, in our wholeness, with our full resources available to move through our life. In the first week, we worked with practices that led with the body and worked on integrating the breath and the mind. This week, we're working on practices that lead with the voice and with the breath. We've talked a lot in this series about the importance and the purpose of these practices as integration between these 3 parts of ourselves. And that is absolutely true. There's another aspect that I wanted to focus on for today's conversation, which is that while integration is high on the list of priorities in these practices, truly the ultimate goal of this work with Sanmitsu is to work on training our mind. All of these practices guide us towards better training our mind on how and what to focus on, where to place our attention that will shift our physiology, our emotions, our mental state, and therefore our beliefs and behaviors in ways that align us with our wholest, truest, most healthy selves. This is an enlightenment pathway. The system of Reiki came out of esoteric Buddhism and Shinto practice. And so the practices therein are really guiding us towards settling into wholeness and right relationship with ourselves, with each other, and with the world around us. And they do this in ways that are both simple, elegant, and also very deep. And so while we work with all of the Mitsu, the mystic practices, really what we're after is to train our mind on how and where to focus so that we can stay in this place of ease, this place of balance. Let me give you an example. In our first week, we worked with a practice called mountains. This is a practice that comes from Tai Chi, and it uses really beautiful gestures of the body, movement of the body from side to side, a posture of the body that is nice, straight, upright, with a wide foundation like the mountain, and gentle movement through which we align the movement of the body and the breath, focusing our attention on all of these elements as we move along. As we do this practice, we come to embody characteristics of the mountain that are beneficial to us. Again, that strong, stable foundation, that feeling of stability, of rootedness, of groundedness, of safety that comes from feeling grounded. That feeling of lift, of uprightness, of spaciousness that comes from observing and feeling inside of ourselves that tall, reaching mountain and the spaciousness above and around. The solidity of it, while at the same time, the flow and movement of the life upon the mountain when the wind blows. And so in this practice of mountains, using our body, our breath, and our mind, we can come to embody these aspects of the mountain inside of ourselves. And then when we move out into the world, we have that lived experience of being like the mountain to help inform us and perhaps shift the way we might deal with certain situations. For example, I am a person who had a history of dissociation, meaning my mind and my body kind of not being in good relationship with each other, tendency for my mind to wander, to not pay attention to what was happening inside of my body and in my intuition. This was a trauma response that built up over time. It's one that many of us experience. It's one that can keep us safe from paying too much attention to something that is harmful. But at the same time, it disconnects our mind and our body in a way that leaves us absent of our full capacity. And so if I were to be moving through a space or, walking through my day, I'm thinking of a particular situation in my mind. And perhaps somebody came towards me with a lot of nervous or frantic energy. Perhaps this person is very upset. They're very pressed for time, or they're very upset about something. They're very anxious. And that's all in their energy, all in their gestures, all in their speech pattern. And they're coming at me with all of that anxiousness, all of that frantic energy. From my previous tendency to be dissociated, it would be very easy for me to get swept up into all of that swirling, frantic, anxious energy, to take on that feeling of anxiousness, of franticness, to feel that nervousness in my body, and to, begin to respond to that person, perhaps with defensiveness, or to just step right into the anxiousness with them. But instead, because I have a lived experience of the mountain, I can shift my attention away from that swirling, frantic energy and down to my feet, planted on the ground, down to the center of my belly, that center of gravity where all of our movement comes from, that keeps us stable. In just a couple of breaths, I can remind myself that I have the mountain inside of me. I have an embodied experience of that sensation of stability, safety, strength, flexibility, that all comes from the experience of being in practice with the practice of mountains or other similar practices that have us to focus our attention on these things. And in doing that, just a couple of breaths, if I have been practicing prior to this situation, if I've given myself the opportunity to experience those sensations on my own when I'm just in my practice, then in that moment of possibly being pulled into anxiety and frustration and anxiousness and all of that swirling energy, instead, I feel calm, I feel grounded, my nervous system stays relaxed. I don't start to go into a fight or flight response along with that person. And I can be that point of stability, of strength, of calm inside of the midst of this storm. And the interesting thing is, oftentimes, when we can find that place of stability and calm inside of ourselves, we can influence the people around us. That person in their franticness has the opportunity for their nervous system to calm down a little bit as well. It's entirely up to them if they're going to take on the energy that you're sharing in that moment, but they have that opportunity. And it's in this way that we can change the tone of any room that we walk into based on where we're focusing our attention. And so while the practice of mountains is very much a practice that leads with the body, this beautiful posture, this gesture, this movement, it is truly about helping our mind to learn how to focus on, in this example, the sensation of groundedness and stability and flexibility. There are practices that lead with the mind, where our body is still, our breath is calm, and we're really focusing our attention without so much support from these other mitsu, these other aspects of ourselves. But for most of us, those are more advanced practices, because for most of us, our mind is very accustomed to being scattered, to being all over the place, to being unfocused and unsettled, or to having a difficult time settling in one place for very long. And so practices of the mind are advanced practices in the traditions that Reiki comes from. And we don't always understand that in Western culture, in American culture where I am. For example, the ways in which mindfulness meditation has been taken into our culture. Mindfulness meditation, which in its original context within Buddhist tradition is an advanced practice. You don't step off the street having no practice right into a practice that has you sit still and focused and pay attention to your thoughts and be with the conditions of your mind with very little else to focus on. We don't step right into that in the original context from which this practice came. Instead, you work towards that advanced practice, beginning with practices of the body and practices of service. Inside of Buddhist communities all over the world, your first port of call is to be of service within the community, to help clean the temple, to set up the chairs for service, to be of service to the community using the physical labor of our body. From there is a lot of chanting involved in most Buddhist practice, a lot of work with the breath and the voice, moving towards, if and when a person is ready, these practices that lead with the mind, that really have us focus our attention solely on the experience of our mind. And so we've been working with that spectrum, with that collection of experiences in this set of practices. And we began with practices of the body. We're now in practices of the breath and the voice. We will be working with practices of the mind. But what I want to say is that in this limited container of these short daily practices for a short period of time, we are not going to be working with practices that leave us solely in the realm of the mind. We're going to continue to incorporate elements that help us to focus, symbols and images, mantras that we chant with the voice, gestures of the body. So while we'll get to practices that lead with contemplations of the mind, we're going to continue to support our practice with the full capacity of our being, rather than jumping right into the advanced practice of staying solely within our mind. Okay, that is plenty of context for today. I know it was a little bit more than I had intended to talk before we jumped into practice today, but it just felt really important to not only emphasize this piece around the importance, really the higher purpose of these practices being training our mind with how and where and in what way to focus, but also to pull the threads back to those first practices of the body. Why do we begin there? What does that have to do with our intentions with this practice overall? And so today's practice is going to be working with the voice, with the breath. We're going to continue what we began yesterday, which is working with the precepts from the system of Reiki. So within the system of Reiki, there are several different places where we explicitly apply voice practices. All of the practices involve the breath, but there are a few that explicitly involve the voice. And it begins with recitation of the precepts, the foundational principles of the system of Reiki, which not only give us guidance on how to practice, but also describe the outcomes that we can expect when we do diligently practice. We will work with the precepts in their original Japanese form, and we'll work with them as a chant, as a mantra, intoning in a rhythmic way these words so that they can get inside of our body. The vibration of them can be with us in a visceral, physical way before we work with them as a contemplation. There are contemplation practices with the precepts, and there are chanting practices with the precepts. We're going to begin with the voice. So in yesterday's video, I went over some of the strategy for how we practice chanting inside of the system of Reiki, just the kind of strategy, the physiology that we use. So I'm not going to go into great detail about that here. If you want more of a detailed primer on that, you can go check out yesterday's video if you haven't already and get up to speed there. But the essence of it is that it's an extension of our belly breathing practice that we've done before. Breathing into the belly, drawing our attention into the belly, letting our body be soft so that there's room for the breath. And then as we exhale, intoning the chant, the mantra through the full expanse of the exhale, So we're kind of setting the pace of how fast or slow we say the mantra, aligned with the pace of our own exhale, which will be different for each of us, and even different for from day to day for any given person. So you might need to make some modifications there. If you run out of breath and there's still more words in the mantra, no big deal. Just take another slow, deep breath. But what we want to avoid is breathing shallow into the chest and quickly. So that is enough for that. And let's get our text on the screen. All right, so here we have the precepts written in their Japanese form. And we'll be reading these down each column, left column, then right column. I'll begin with about 10 recitations, nice and slow, and give you a chance to kind of wrap your mind and your mouth around these words. Join me at your own pace when you're ready. And then I'll do another set that's faster and set to a little bit more of a rhythm. There's no right or wrong way. Either way is perfectly fine for practice. It's just really what feels good and right for you on a given day. So settling your body in for practice, taking a couple of breaths to relax. Letting your belly be soft so that your breath can move in and down all the way into the belly. Making sure that as you inhale, your belly is expanding with that breath. If it's not, then probably your breath is staying high in the chest. And if you're having difficulty, gently inviting the breath to move into the belly, or if your belly feels constricted so that it doesn't expand as you breathe, then your practice for today is to gently work on bringing your breath lower into your body. Never mind chanting, just work with inviting the breath into your belly. There are strategies for doing that. If you'd like to know more, you can reach out. And so with our breath moving freely into our body, just allowing our mind to follow your inhale down into your belly. Just for the next couple of rounds of breath, practice on focusing your attention just below your belly button and deep into the center of your body. Notice the way your breath moves into your body and your body expands. And as you exhale, you can imagine your energy expanding from the center of your body outward in all directions. Perhaps you feel it as a sensation of expansion. Perhaps you visualize a spark of light expanding from your center outward. Just practicing the sensation of expansion. And in a moment, as we begin this chant, that sound, that vibration will expand from our body, from our voice, outward in all directions, following the movement of the breath. Let us begin, nice and slow. Kyo dake wa hikaru na, shinpai su na, kansha shite, gyo o hageme, hito ni shinsetsu ni. Kyo dake wa hikaru na, shinpai su na, kansha shite, gyo o hageme, hito ni shinsetsu ni. Kyo dake wa hikaru na, shinpai su na, 感謝して行を励め、人に親切に、今日だけは怒るな、心配すな、感謝して世を励め、人に親切に、今日だけは怒るな、心配すな、感謝して世を励め、人に親切に、今日だけは怒るな、心配すな、感謝して世を励め、人に親切に、今日だけは怒るな、心配すな、感謝して世を励め、人に親切に、今日だけは怒るな、心配すな、感謝して世を励め、人に親切に。Two more. 今日だけは怒るな、心配すな、感謝して世を励め、人に親切に。今日だけは怒るな、心配すな、感謝して世を励め、人に親切に。Let's pause here for a couple of breaths. And 10 repetitions at a faster pace. 今日だけは怒るな、心配すな、感謝して行を励め、人に親切に。今日だけは怒るな、心配すな、感謝して行を励め、人に親切に。今日だけは怒るな、心配すな、感謝して行を励め、人に親切に。今日だけは怒るな、心配すな、感謝して行を励め、人に親切に。今日だけは怒るな、心配すな、感謝して行を励め、人に親切に。今日だけは怒るな、心配すな、感謝して行を励め、人に親切に。今日だけは怒るな、心配すな、感謝して行を励め、人に親切に。 今日だけは怒るな、心配すな、感謝して今日励め、人に親切に。今日だけは怒るな、心配すな、感謝して今日励め、人に親切に。今日だけは怒るな、心配すな、感謝して今日励め、人に親切に。And coming to stillness and silence. Taking a couple of breaths here as you continue to feel the vibration of this mantra in your body, in your energy. Still emanating this mantra from your center, even in silence. And bringing your hands to Gasso at your heart, a gesture of gratitude and completion. And coming back together. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that practice. I hope you enjoyed thinking in a little bit of different ways about these practices of Sanmitsu, the ways in which they intertwine with each other, the roles that they have, the ultimate purpose of learning to focus our mind on what is most important. The word mantra, part of its origins, means to protect the mind, practices to protect the mind. What is it that our mind needs protecting from? It needs protection from jumping to the future and feeling anxious or worried about what might be coming. It needs protection from jumping to the past, feeling attached or frustrated or angry about things that have happened, or even dwelling on beautiful, good things that have happened and yet have passed. Basically, things that pull our attention away from this present moment, from a sensation of gratitude, of compassion for ourselves and others, appreciation for what is happening in this very moment, and the ability to respond to what is going on right now. And so we work with these practices of the body, the voice, and the mind to protect our mind from the injury, the suffering of fear, of anger, of distraction, of dissociation. And as we do this little by little, moment by moment, gentle practice by gentle practice, we become like the mountain, fortified, strong, stable, on a firm foundation, tall, wide, spacious, reaching up and outward into the spaciousness around, flexible, able to move with the winds of change that come through and buffet the trees that are growing upon us, and deeply connected to all of the life which we touch. So friends, as you continue to walk with us through these practices, may you continue to pay attention to the ways in which you are rooted, spacious, and connected. And as you do, may you feel deeply fortified for that journey. Until next time, thanks for joining me. I love you. Goodbye.